Hello, I'm Sally St. James. Welcome to Matchmaker. Pack your bags because we're off to Paris, city of light, city of love, where you, the audience, will have the chance to decide the fate of our next two contestants. Is it love at first sight or tear-filled rejection? It's all up to you. To cast your vote, simply enter "we" or "no" on your mobile phone and text message us at 443208116478573952, or you can email us at decide the fate of our French contestants at matchmaker.co.uk, or simply cast us a holographic dipto transfigure optic to mf3.pit if your thermo wireless ratio is above 113.
This is footage of Katya doing a college project in the year 2006, almost a decade before her debut on RuPaul's Drag Race Season 7. People talk about Katya like she just sort of happened, as if Drag Race flipped the switch and suddenly there she was. But when you actually look at her career, she didn't just stumble into this version of herself. A lot of it was built slowly in smaller rooms and with way less payoff. This video is going to be a deep dive into how Katya's choices added up over time. And by the end of it, you'll probably know things about Katya that you didn't even realize you weren't aware of. But before we start, are you someone that has an online following or is trying to build one? Well, this video is brought to you by Squarespace, the super easy platform that helps you build a website without the stress. Whether you're a creator, a business owner, or just want to share your work online, Squarespace has everything you need to get your site up and running in no time. You might think that it's hard to make your own website from scratch, but with Squarespace, it doesn't have to be. Their drag and drop builder and sleek professional templates make it simple to create a site that fits your vision. No coding skills required. Pick a design, tweak it to match your style, and you're good to go. Although what really sets Squarespace apart, it's its integration system. Everything you need to run your site is in one place. If you're selling products or services, Squarespace Payments lets you quickly set up a store and offer payment options like Apple Pay, Klarna, and Afterpay. Want to grow your brand? Their SEO tools help your site show up in more searches, bringing in the right people. Ready to take your website to the next level? Click the link in the description, and once you're ready to go public, get 10% off your first website or domain. Now, let's begin.
That was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
The birth of Katya's drag didn't start in nightlife. And that's important because if you've ever been confused by literally anything she does, this is why. While Katya was attending art school in her very early 20s, she did a lot of performance art and was way more interested in what happens when someone cross-dresses on stage as a character, putting on a concept, rather than illusion, glamour, and trying to look polished. That tendency to want to be experimental is what would help her reach international stardom. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. One thing to know about Katya's origins is that even before drag, she was already interested in cross-dressing, just not traditional drag. She saw it as theatrical, something you use to unlock a character, which is why she's always said that the whole Russian aesthetic thing was never really the point. The core of her character was confidence, and being in the Boston drag scene played into this. Ultimately, this new journey she was taking by diving into drag was something she had been wanting to do since the first time she ever performed in drag while still in art school. Because it was there that she presented her own college final video project in full character. She had terrible makeup, the outfit was rough, but the character that we would go on to know as Katya already had a clear base, even when she was just doing it as a small joke for her and her classmates. If you didn't know, Katya's original drag name was literally just Katie, which thank God that changed. And the reason it did is because she'd end up wanting to lean in a bit more to the whole Russian aesthetic. What people don't realize is that she actually put a lot of effort into building her drag persona. She's actually studied the language, learned music, immersed herself in the culture, and she said that people massively underestimate how much work went into building that part of her character. It wasn't just an accent she was throwing on as a joke. It was studied and intentional. And while she would love to visit Russia someday, she's admitted that performing there might not be the best idea, for obvious reasons. As I said before, the whole character itself came together while she was finishing art school, when she was taking an evening Russian class, and apparently the teacher was a lot. Very over the top and quote villain coded, which was completely fascinating to her. Clearly that teacher must have stood out a lot because it ended up turning into a core memory for her. In a way, the teacher ended up becoming a blueprint for her character. The name Katya in itself was also chosen very deliberately. She liked that it was basic on purpose, being that it was a super common name in Russia. To her, being memorable had nothing to do with having a special or flashy name, which honestly feels very on brand for her entire philosophy around drag. Essentially, Russian culture stayed at the center of everything she was doing early on. The music, literature, all of it fed into how she approached the character, work, language, and her performance. Around that same time, her philosophy professor encouraged her to pursue drag instead of trying to go do grad school, which Katya sees as one of those quiet, life-changing moments, because without that push, she said she probably would have ended up miserable, or worse, living a completely different life. To put it into perspective, we are now in the year 2007. Katya has just come out of art school and was trying to get her foot into the Boston drag community. She's talked about doing these sweaty, chaotic performance shows around Boston for years that were not polished at all. At the same time, she was working at a boutique nearby where a lot of drag queens would come in and shop too. It's interesting because she'd also crossed paths with queens that would go on to be on Drag Race way before her, with queens like Jessica Wilde or Nina Flowers, who apparently were very nice towards her anytime they met. At this point in her life, the retail job was working. It was paying her bills, but more than that, within that setting, she often was surrounded by really intense, strange, and sometimes heartbreaking people. Customers who would just say something completely unprompted, but weirdly profound, as if they were just confessing something to a stranger in passing. And given that I used to work at a produce department, I can confirm that customers will sometimes trauma dump on you. The job itself paid badly and it was frustrating, but looking back at anecdotes like these make it for her a weirdly magical time of her life, one that was calm and serene despite all the financial struggles. Little did she know what the future would hold. Nowadays, Katya has become so associated with her sense of humor that I think people forget she's also just a really solid performer. Like, genuinely. Back in 2007, she won Miss Gay Massachussetes, which already adds way more depth to her drag than people tend to give her credit for. And yes, that's the same pageant Alyssa Edwards would go on to win in 2010. Obviously, Alyssa won at the national level, where all the state winners compete against each other, whereas Katya won at the state level. Still, that's not nothing. Being a pageant title holder that early on in your career shines a light on the fact that Katya wasn't always doing this weird art type of drag. One of Katya's main home bars at the time was Jack's Cabaret in Boston. And honestly, that part of her story is really sweet, because even almost a decade later, when she finally gets cast on season 7, that bar was loudly supportive. They were lining up for viewing parties, reacting to the episodes, fully backing their local queen who had suddenly become an international drag star. That's why even when you go back and look at pre-Drag Race footage of Katya, or as I like to call it, vintage Katya, it's kind of its own thing. It's not just nostalgia, it's watching someone fully commit to their artistic point of view early on in their career, and never watering it down for anybody. One thing that really stands out to me watching these is just how often she was doing the Russian character back then. Accent, references, the whole thing.
It is hours away from 2009. How are you?
Novem Godam!
You know, you are in the United States, but already in Russia and Hong Kong, they've already... No, you're not at the border, girl. At Hong Kong, they've already, done the boo boo baba.
Oh, of course. Because
But,
it's like 18 hours earlier.
Yes. So, are you still bisexual?
Oh, very much so. I would like to say to everybody, S Novem Godom, Happy New Year. I wish you all the best. 2K9 is all about strapless dresses, flared denim, and good feeling.
Good feeling. And
I remember her talking after season 7 aired about how scared she was to lean into that character too much on the show, worrying that it would flop. Looking back now, it's pretty eye-opening because that Russian persona played a huge role in keeping the momentum of her early drag career alive. But at the same time, it might have been a blessing that she was pulling back from it on season 7, because it gave us space to actually see the artist behind the character. There's definitely an alternate universe where she goes all in with the Russian character on season 7, and ends up with a storyline similar to Ben de la Creme on season 6, getting critiqued for hiding behind a persona instead of showing vulnerability. Speaking of which, another fun fact is that Katya was almost cast on season 6, and usually when I hear that about a queen, my immediate thought is, oh, thank God that didn't happen. But honestly, I kind of do see her fitting in with that cast. Those queens all had very fully formed personas. That said, season 7 being filled with less cartoonish personalities really worked in her favor. It gave Katya way more room to stand out as something genuinely different. Now we get to the year 2008. Around this time, Katya did a small series of interviews with a Boston queen named Diamond Dunhill. They weren't all filmed at once. They were shot months apart, but when you watch them back now, they accidentally tell a story. And it's kind of eerie. You're seeing a version of Katya who had absolutely no idea what's coming. No sense that her life is about to take this massive left turn. She's just there right now, talking, existing, completely blind of how drastically everything is about to change, or how this character she had been perfecting would soon turn into a viral sensation.
But tonight I have the pleasure and I am anticipating a wonderful, fun-filled, loving interview with Katya.
Всем привет. Hello.
Do you need a translator?
No, I can speak English.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We have many viewers out there who want to know who you are.
My name is Ekaterina Petrovna Zamolodchkova, but my nickname is Katya. I born originally Ukraine, but it was Soviet Union. I come to Boston here to pursue life in entertainment.
And what really gets me is that by the year 2009, in one of these interviews, we get to see her casually talking about the first season of RuPaul's Drag Race, which had literally just finished airing at that time. It was just this new show that existed in the background of her life, which is wild because looking back now, knowing how central Drag Race is going to become not just to her career, but for the entire public identity, these clips properly represent how not even the queer community back then knew about the potential the franchise would end up having. Anyway, it's an interesting little snapshot of Katya before everything.
But you've actually been replaced now.
By who?
Rebecca Glasscock.
Who?
She's on the RuPaul's Drag Race on Logo. You have Logo, internet, or
Logo.
Logo.
Logo 6. I have, except it's like goes into the
Have you watched the RuPaul Drag Race?
No, I don't watch TV.
It's a wonderful. Alright. Well, they had 9 contestants.
Okay.
Let me see. I'm gonna give you a name, and then you just tell me what I draw from you. Pork chop.
Bling bling.
Angina.
Monistat 7.
Akasha.
Oh, bad movie.
Nina Flowers.
Puerto Rico. That's it, right? Oh, yeah, Nina, I know. Yeah.
Rebecca Glasscock.
I don't know this glass short lady. I don't. I feel offended.
How about Chanel?
Oh.
Thank you.
Oh, no.
Thank you.
No, I don't like.
Who else is there? BB.
BB King. Bluegrass. I like bluegrass. I don't mind.
And
I like all kind of music.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
We will not appreciate.
Oh, Tammy.
Tammy. The eyes of Tammy Faye.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I don't watch TV really much.
By the year 2010, Katya was already becoming known in the Boston drag scene. The kind of queen where if your name was on a flyer, people noticed you. And there's this one poster from April 5th, 2010 that honestly tells you everything you need to know. First of all, the tagline alone, "How I Overcame Glaucoma and Other Adversities," already feels like a fully formed Katya line. Like, that humor was already there before she ever appeared on television. Now, here's where it gets insane. The cover was $85, and that's in the year 2010, which in today's money would be like charging people $500 in the year 2026. So clearly, the girls were not playing around. Our queen was being positioned as the event. And then when you look closer, the address, well, a McDonald's parking lot, of course. Finally, the cherry on top is having the whole poster get made, and then you look at the performance time and it's just 3 minutes, spanning from 12:15 to 12:18 a.m. This entire poster, the copy, the price point, the drama, all for a 3-minute performance. It's just pure camp. This is the kind of marketing that would only later be rivaled by Trixie Mattel. So yeah, by 2010, Katya wasn't just another local queen. She was already operating on a wavelength that most people wouldn't catch up to for years. Now we get to the year 2013. There's something about watching a younger Katya that's really strange, because she somehow feels exactly the same as the Katya we know now, and also completely different. I don't even know how to properly explain it.
For those of you who don't know me, hello, hi, how are you? My name is Ekaterina Petrovna Zamolchkova. 6 years ago, I was just your average run-of-the-mill bisexual Russian transvestite hooker with nothing to lose. And look! So much has changed. I'm 3 pounds heavier. I learned German. Wunderschön. And I finally figured out how to dilate my anal cavity with no long-term consequences.
There's this undertone when she speaks that feels almost innocent, like softer, less guarded. And don't get me wrong, maybe I'm the one that's projecting here, because it could very well be nostalgia just doing its thing. Since this is the same feeling I get when I watch early footage of RuPaul back in the 1980s. Everything just feels lighter and more simple, less aware of how iconic they're eventually going to become. Anyways, watching those interviews back to back really made it feel like none of this came out of nowhere. It had all been being perfected for many years.
Oh, wait. I realized something that when you come to Russia, the poster will say Diamond Dunhill, putting the da back in Florida. Yeah, it's good.
We really give a
Yeah, we're putting the in meh.
Did you love that, Paul? Did you love that?
What are you guys watching?
We are Boston's preeminently lukewarm entertainers.
Because we're actually here at shit show and
Tepid, the most tepid, underwhelming experience you'll ever half sleep through. Okay, it's just like.
Will they tip me tonight?
Oh, probably not. Will they be awake? They'll probably be in the bathroom for half the show. I read a bedtime story.
Katya's been pretty open about the fact that she had almost quit drag entirely before RuPaul's Drag Race even happened. She was burned out from all the local gigs, the bachelorette parties, and felt creatively stuck, and ended up going back to school to pursue a master's degree in mental health counseling when she got the call. At that point in her life, drag didn't feel like a sustainable long-term career. But Drag Race changed the equation by giving her a space where she could do drag the way she actually wanted, with an audience that genuinely wanted to see it. In the weeks leading up to filming, she had almost no time to prepare. Most of it was spent sewing, packing, and pulling materials together. She was so focused on the logistics that she didn't emotionally prepare for the competition at all, something she later realized was a major mistake. By the very first day of filming, she was completely overwhelmed, to the point where if a producer had offered an option for someone to leave immediately, she would have taken it without hesitation. So now we get to season 7. The promo was officially released on December 8th, 2014. This promo was widely criticized at the time, especially when compared to earlier seasons that had more cinematic, high-effort promos. For a lot of viewers, season 7 marked a point where Drag Race began cutting corners and really changing things up in terms of what to expect from them. Going into season 7, for Katya, money was basically non-existent. Her entire drag package was thrown together with borrowed clothes and borrowed cash, and it wasn't until she actually arrived that it fully hit how underprepared she was. Queens like Violet, Fame, and Jasmine showed up with real wardrobes, and Fame's wigs in particular felt like they were operating on a completely different level. That kind of drag simply wasn't a part of her reference point at that time. She would just put on a shake and go wig and call it a day. This financial stress followed her throughout filming. 5 suitcases were allowed and flights out there were covered, but getting everything home afterwards was expensive and chaotic. Her bank account went into overdraft mid-season and money had to be transferred just to get by. Even her baggage fees were paid with borrowed cash. Subsequently, filming itself was extremely isolating. As you know, phones and electronics were taken away, which meant long periods of time alone in her hotel room with nothing to do and no way to look anything up. Every reference that she made had to come purely from memory, which made the challenges much harder than they appear on TV, which is actually a pretty good point. Obviously, it makes sense that queens are cut out from the world when filming, but imagine if they did have access to the internet and could better prepare for things like improv or acting challenges by getting some inspiration from something online. But anyways, the first few days were overwhelming. After landing in Los Angeles, the queens were taken straight to a studio where RuPaul walked in and began asking personal questions. She said that while it was intimidating, it was also surprising how close Ru knew the details from everyone's audition tapes. That same day included being asked to sing in a recording studio with no real experience, which only added to the sense of panic.
Drag you is miracle. Drag you ready for me. Drag you is miracle. Drag you ready for me.
So now we get to the season 7 entrances. When Katya was about to walk into the workroom, she was having a moment of self-doubt. Standing there in her cheap drag, realizing that the room was a fake soundstage, hearing some of the other queens through the walls, the main thought that went through her mind was, can I still get out of this? But once she was inside, the cameras, lights, and everything just completely took over. She said that RuPaul taught her 3 basic rules about Hollywood: show up on time, be prepared, and don't complain. And despite everything going on in Katya's mind, especially feeling alienated by big personalities, questioning whether she even liked drag queens, and wondering if she wanted to keep doing drag at all, but that at the end of the day, something was clear, and it was that she loved watching Drag Race and found it fun. She even defends some of the things she got minor criticism for early on, like her brightly colored interview jacket, which was a $2 Goodwill find, saying that she loved it regardless of what anyone thought. Which I didn't even realize until making this video that some people didn't like it. But anyways, on episode 2 is where everything really falls apart for her. The Glamazonian Airways challenge asks a lot at once. You have 1 day to learn choreography, a spoken monologue, and a lip sync song that she had never heard before. She spent the entire night trying to memorize the monologue, even writing it out over and over, yet it just wouldn't stick.
You could call me a flight attendant, but I don't care for that word attendant because it makes it sound like I'm gonna wait on somebody. I'm not. I appreciate your attention at this time. We should be taking off shortly.
When the performance went badly, that wasn't even the end of it. They had to do the challenge again, and both takes were bad. From the outside, it just read as messy television, but she described it as a full body humiliation. The worst feeling she had ever experienced up to that point. And even years later, she said that she still can't watch that part of the episode and has to fast forward through it, just from the sheer cringe that goes through her body. What I liked about Katya's review with Trixie, where they revisited their run on season 7, is the tidbits that they've left us throughout. For example, confessionals happen immediately after challenges. You wipe your face, maybe don't even shower, and you're straight into an interview room. Producers will ask you to repeat the same thoughts again and again and again, with more energy. So everything starts to sound like it's life or death. At the same time, she's been clear that there were producers and crew members who were genuinely kind and supportive, which mattered a lot considering how cut off the queens were from their phones, family, and any real outside support. Anyways, we all know the story of how this episode goes. Katya ends up in the bottom 2 with Sasha Bell and delivers one of the most iconic lip syncs of the series. Going into it, she thought about how the song they were lip syncing to had a strong build to it that was finally gonna give her the space to show that she can perform. And that's exactly what she did. With that, it also solidified that if people hadn't been doing so already, she was a queen to watch. Episode 3 is the Shake Square Challenge. Katya has consistently described it as one of the most miserable things she did on RuPaul's Drag Race. Looking back, she blames the challenge on something that was more so on the hands of the production team that wrote the script, because it had a fundamentally broken concept. It wasn't actually Shakespeare, but it wasn't effective modern comedy either. Watching it back, she's very clear that no one could have ever made the material work. Her approach was to pick a very small role, assuring that she'd be able to stick around long enough to take bigger risks later. The bearded runway is one of the few parts of the episode that she felt confident about. She did Abraham Lincoln, and she still stands by it as a strong concept with an actual point of view. And I do too. It's a perfect encapsulation of the campy drag that these days are largely missing in a sea of super expensive drag. Nevertheless, it's the judging that really stuck with her. RuPaul has her infamous blow up with the whole "I don't want to see any excuses" speech.
You know, FYI for all of you girls up there, I don't want to hear any goddamn excuses. Be prepared.
We didn't have time to re-rehearse.
Make it work. Make it work. Make it happen. I don't want to hear any goddamn excuses anymore.
That moment was actually something very unsettling for her. Even looking back makes her feel a bit uncomfortable. At the same time, she agrees that the work didn't meet the show's standards, but also points out how unrealistic the expectations were. The queens were asked to memorize these scripts, rehearse, perform, get into drag, and sell weak material in an extremely short amount of time. In her view, both things can be true. RuPaul wasn't wrong, but also the queens were set up to fail. Ultimately, the episode's outcome results in Kennedy and Jasmine in the bottom, with Jasmine being the one that's eliminated and sent home. This would end up carrying a lot of emotional weight for Katya. She remembers seeing Jasmine emotionally checking out early, packing her bags before they even got critiques on the main stage, and just very clearly giving up, which felt so weird to see, especially in those initial seasons, knowing how people auditioned for Drag Race for years and would beg to get the opportunity. So to see someone decide that they were done by episode 3 left a noticeable void in the room. At that point, Katya didn't feel particularly close to anyone yet, and Jasmine leaving made the workroom feel even emptier. On episode 4, Katya ends up grouped with Trixie, Fame, and Pearl, a mix that she describes as strange but workable. At this point, Katya admits she was still operating with the mindset that she wasn't the main character yet. She felt very mid, and standing next to queens who looked more polished or more Drag Race ready felt safer. It's clear that this instinct works against you. Being super quiet is usually how you disappear. Because even if you're the best entertainer in the world, if you're too quiet and aren't providing producers material that they can work with, then your time is counted. Unless of course you're Cameron Michaels. The challenge for this week was parodying RuPaul songs. This is actually something that Katya has said bothers her, because it's around this era that Drag Race starts to become a little bit too self-referential with itself. Jokes that only land if you're already deep into the Drag Race universe. This made me curious. Those of you watching this, if you were someone who recently became a fan of RuPaul's Drag Race, what was it like when you would hear them make clear references to older seasons that you don't know about? Do you feel left out, or does it not really bother you? But anyways, ultimately, Katya's group chooses not to focus on references, and just has their parody song be its own separate concept. It's important to note how big the workload is for the queens. In a single day, they're forming groups, writing lyrics, planning, shooting a music video, making choreography from scratch, recording vocals, learning the track, getting into drag, and performing. It's quite literally the survival of the fittest. For the runway, the theme was green, and given that back then she had no money, she also had no time to try and find some cool fashion reference, and there wasn't really an elevated point of view. It was literally just, I found this green thing, so I wore the green thing. Despite that, it actually felt pretty good from a viewer's perspective. Yeah, it's not amazing, but it also looks so camp in the way she looks presenting it. This episode results in Trixie not just landing in the bottom, but also getting eliminated and going home. At this point, while they weren't extremely close, Trixie and Katya had developed somewhat of a friendship between them. So to work together on a challenge and see Trixie go home fourth was tough. It was the first moment she realized how little, quote, merit protects you and how being mid doesn't keep you safe. It just makes you disposable. And when it's someone close to you taking the hit, it hurts even more. In the moment, everything feels more elevated. 4 episodes feels like nothing. It feels embarrassing. And because this was still early Drag Race, there was only 1 season a year and no constant all-stars as a safety net. Eliminations here carried real weight. The silence afterwards, the way the queens aren't allowed to talk while production resets the room, sticks with you. It's not dramatic in a fun way, it's deeply uncomfortable, and I can only imagine what it must have been like. As the competition goes on, we start to see Katya really start to cement herself as more of a contender. The Despia Awards Challenge is where she realizes she doesn't love to collaborate under pressure, especially when the chemistry just isn't there. It was also difficult for her to approach the challenge in itself because she wasn't 100% sure about leaning into her Russian character. At this point in her career, all she was thinking about was how her actions would affect the long term. If she did do a good job showcasing her Russian character, would she be stuck doing it forever? That fear is what would make her hold back instead of going bigger, something she realized was a mistake. What actually saves her in this episode wasn't the challenge itself, but a single improvised moment on the runway. She apparently said something while she was walking the runway that made RuPaul cackle laughing. It was at that moment that she realized in real time that Ru gets her humor. That recognition reassures her that even if she's not dominating challenges, she's being understood. And that's part of what would help keep her safe. By the time we get to episode 6, we are halfway through the competition. We got another bad challenge with the Whatever Happened to Merle Ginsburg that fell pretty flat. And once again, according to Katya, there was a clear pattern in this season in regards to challenges. And it was bad material that no amount of talent could truly save. When we get to the Death Becomes Her runway, Katya's look is stupid, but also super clear, and is proof of how even drag that isn't necessarily expensive can still have an impact on the runway. Episode 7 is when we get to learn more about Katya's issues with her self-confidence. For example, it's here that we get the anxiety storyline, including the conversation about how she's addicted to anxiety and her fear of RuPaul. She admits the feelings were real, but that she was uncomfortable with how the moment was framed. She didn't want to be a spokesperson for sobriety or vulnerability, and it was sort of a struggle to deal with the fact that something so personal was now being shaped for reality TV. So yes, while it was good from a contestant standpoint that she was being so open, it also made some of her biggest insecurities become main conversation topics in the fanbase. If you didn't know, after filming season 7 concluded, Katya spent about 3 months in a severe depression. A lot of it came from feeling like she hadn't fully realized herself on the show, combined with the anxiety of wanting to see how audiences would respond once the season aired. That period is what ultimately led to the creation of Reflections and Regrets, a way for her to process the experience publicly and reclaim some control over the narrative. Throughout those videos, she's been very clear about how she feels towards her fans. She says that she genuinely loves them, appreciates that they get her, and even finds it funny when people argue online about whether there's too much Katya content. She also constantly was pushing back on fan backlash towards queens like Ginger Minj and Kennedy Davenport for throwing shade, pointing out that shade is part of drag and part of the competition. When it comes to her relationship with RuPaul on the show, Katya is super self-critical, which is a common theme when it comes to her story. She takes full responsibility for the disconnect and acknowledges that what audiences responded to wasn't necessarily what Ru saw, and acknowledges that she completely clammed up around Ru whenever she was in the workroom. There was a lot of awkward, unaired interactions between them, despite knowing that Ru understood her off-kilter humor. What I like about this is that instead of framing it as Ru misjudging her, she sees it just as her own inability to show up authentically in those moments. Ru did try to get her to relax and be herself, but but Katya just simply couldn't, which made sense. And to be fair, she was already keeping up as best as she could, especially after going from being a local queen in Boston to now being surrounded by cameras in one of the fastest growing television franchise in the world. As we wrap up the rest of Katya's run through season 7, once we get to the final quarter of the competition, more than half the queens have already gone home. The John Waters musical was the perfect challenge for her. Her own number ended up being one of the most enjoyable days that she had throughout the filming of season 7. The runway theme this week was ugly drag, which is basically Katya's dream. At the same time, she's very aware that her makeup skills just weren't there yet she was still putting up a fight. And that's why for so many viewers, she was the clear contender for the crown. By the time we get to the top 5 Hello Kitty challenge, Katya is no longer enjoying herself. And even small annoyances like the fact that the materials that they were given to work with were cheap and the sewing machines were unreliable, what made it worse is that she barely had any time to even build an idea. So while she did know how to sew, she's not someone who thrives at making something coherent out of unfamiliar materials under extreme time pressure while being filmed. This is the point where she admits to falling apart. She's exhausted, anxious, and mentally checked out. So when the judges end up reading her look, the night before the runway, she ended up having a panic attack that brought sleep deprivation. So in that final day, she was fully exhausted and creatively just empty. The only part of the challenge that she actually enjoyed was recording the character voiceover. That was the one moment where she felt aligned again, where she could be playful without the pressure. Her intention with the look was to reference the roots of her drag character, something she felt she hadn't really emphasized that much on the show. The original idea for this, though, was way more polarizing, because it was too inappropriate for Hello Kitty's brand, given that she was calling herself the Soviet skank. If she could redo the look entirely, she said she would have gone with a more Hello Kitty Russian princess aesthetic. An idea that Pearl had suggested, but there just wasn't enough time for her to properly execute that. When she ends up landing in the bottom 2, she wasn't all that surprised. She acknowledges that she was essentially broadcasting to everyone, "Please send me home." Even though she was capable of performing, she wasn't at the mental space to fight like it was life or death. At that point, she had officially mentally checked out. The lip sync against Kennedy Davenport ends with the now iconic synchronized split, which was completely unplanned and purely instinctive. And she did expect to lose the lip sync and ultimately accepted the outcome calmly without bitterness. So when the elimination finally comes, it felt more like relief rather than devastation. By the time we got to the season 7 finale, there was no longer a sense of panic because she wasn't in the running for the crown anymore. That's when she was finally able to actually feel grateful for the whole experience and how insane it was that she actually got to live it. The constant pressure from the public was gone and a new perspective was setting in. And watching it back, she can see how much of her behavior was driven by fear rather than instinct. In her rewatch series with Trixie, she said how she understands why Violet Chachki ended up being chosen as the winner. She had a level of confidence that matched with her execution, and it made her a solid contender to carry the brand forward. Whenever I see Katya talking about her trajectory on season 7, she's never framed it as her getting robbed. She instead hints that while she did find success, in hindsight, she was still too fresh to compete. It's what came after the season aired that brought her confidence, execution, and self-trust. That's why it's her return to All Stars 2 that allows for her to flourish. On All Stars, Katya finally shows up as the version of herself she thought she was during season 7. There's even moments like when they're doing a walkthrough and the guest judge tells Katya that her idea for the commercial challenge was bad and needed to be changed. Only for Katya to stick to her guns because she wasn't going to let someone else dictate what her approach to the challenge should be. It subsequently resulted in one of the most iconic commercial challenges and felt like such a well-deserved win that didn't just represent her proving someone wrong, but also the changed person she had become since the self-doubting Katya of season 7. What we got from her was both an elevation mentally, along with her runway package itself being a step up from what we had seen before. It was all nothing but positives. We got to see her do more lip syncs that were all just as iconic as the next. Her cherry bomb lip sync against the last Alaska being a particular favorite of mine because of how much she embodied the song, and ultimately her making it to the top 3 of All Stars 2 alongside Detox in Alaska with a track record consisting of 3 challenge wins, and having the great majority of the fan base's support for favorite to win the crown. Obviously, Alaska ends up winning All Stars 2. Oftentimes, Katya discusses that she didn't think she was ever gonna win All Stars 2 because she knew it was Alaska's season to lose. Yet, I beg to differ. I feel like Katya winning really would have felt just as fair. Don't get me wrong, at the time, it was always the queen with the best track record that won the title, and Alaska did have 4 wins, along with having a stellar run through the competition. Yet it's interesting to think about that alternate reality, where Katya ends up getting crowned, and the finale of All Stars 2 follows a similar parallel to that of season 5. Where it was Jinx versus Rolaska talks, with ultimately the quirky underdog winning. And one thing's for sure, and it's that having Katya also defeat Rolaska talks would have definitely been eaten up by the audience. But I do wonder if people would have changed their minds a couple months after the fact, and looked back on the season and decided that it should have gone to Alaska because she had the better track record instead. Obviously, I could go on for hours about the parallels of Drag Race theories, but the point I'm making here is that once All Stars 2 was done airing, it marked a new rebirth to Katya's brand. She was already a fan favorite after season 7, so her time in All Stars 2 only propelled her to even more of a mainstay name within the general fan base. The next chapter in Katya's life would be her post-Drag Race trajectory. It's here where she started to zone in alongside Trixie on their Well Present series, Ugh. Katya has described Ugh as something that over time will just exist online as documentation of a real friendship forming. Not a brand strategy, not a gimmick, just 2 people gradually syncing up on camera. Which is true. Who could have thought that even in those early days of their visibility on the internet, that their little show would end up taking them to even more opportunities than nobody thought was possible. What made it even better was that she and Trixie had similar goals, and a correlating sense of comedy. They thought in compatible ways, even when they were approaching things differently. And because of that, their partnership never felt forced. She frames the whole experience as the 2 of them becoming a weird amount of famous together, which is probably the most accurate way to describe it. And with that, they created a machine that would maintain their momentums in their careers, and were now comfortable enough to explore things beyond just touring around the world as a drag queen. If you want to know more details about their Ugh era, as well as their substance abuse issues, you can go watch this other deep dive I did on Katya, which delves more into her journey with the fan base, along with the birth of her business partnership with Trixie. It'll be linked below. By the time we get to 2020, it's been about 5 years since Katya first appeared on Drag Race, and this is when she starts releasing music. Given that this is Katya we're talking about, everyone knew that whatever she was gonna release was gonna be something special. A lot of Drag Race adjacent releases end up feeling transactional, and that was something that she openly said she wanted to avoid. If she didn't genuinely like listening to what she was making, there was no point in putting it out. That standard shaped everything that followed. The whole project ended up taking about 3 years until it was finally complete. Quarantine gave her the space to revisit everything with fresh ears, and she didn't release it to the public until she was 100% confident in it. Some of the songs in the EP are direct responses to the fandom too, like Come in Brazil, which was a reference to how enthusiastic the Brazilian fans are online. It's also one of the more iconic music videos released by a Ru girl, and it's featuring Alaska, who also has her own music video she did years prior called Come to Brazil. Most of this EP isn't in English, which makes sense because she wanted to also lean in on languages like Russian. After the release of her album though, she never really dove back into her music career again, which I do hope she changes her mind about, because it was amazing to see what her mind came up with when approaching music, especially with all the influences she has with a very specific music taste. The problem is, now that we're no longer in the middle of a pandemic, she feels more pressure to deliver something that was just as good as her first EP. Moving on, since around the year 2022, Katya's career has shifted into this really interesting phase where she's not just doing drag, she's also cultivating an online presence. She's still one of the most recognizable queens from RuPaul's Drag Race, but the form that recognition takes has changed. Instead of chasing TV appearances or returning to the competition, she's been building on the things that let her actually be herself while engaging with the audience. And it shows in the stuff that she chooses to be a part of now. One of the biggest parts of her work this decade has been her podcast with Trixie Mattel. The Bald and the Beautiful has been running for years and remains a solid outlet for them. It's a space where they can riff, interview guests, and just chat, which was a perfect deviation from what people had been seeing from them with their Ugh series. The Bald and the Beautiful podcast has basically become their new anchors in terms of their public persona these days. While Katya and Trixie still remain strong business partners, their hit series is now something that's been left in the past. The show ended up running for 8 years on YouTube until a now indefinite hiatus that started beginning in late 2023. And recently, they both confirmed that they weren't planning on returning to that format anytime soon. What's sort of crazy to think about is how she mentioned on her podcast that she actually had been invited to compete on All Stars several times. Even Canada vs. the World asked her, which was really bold of them. Ultimately, she just wasn't interested because she's in a stage of her life and career that side of her drag career is now in the past. And she has a completely different approach to her brand that deviates from when she was a fresh queen representing the franchise. And I think that's the reason why I really wanted to revisit Katya as a topic in the first place. When I made my original video, there was so much of her story that I did not touch on. So I wanted to explore other angles of her career that deserve to be fleshed out too, while still allowing my original video to stand on its own. So I recommend you go watch that if you want to know even more about Katya. I'm curious what you think though. Do you prefer Katya in her early Drag Race era, the years, or the version of her that we have now? And do you think she'll ever come back to music again? Or was that EP just a very specific moment in time? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for even more deep dives like this. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to click the link in the description to get 10% off your first website or domain. I take a moment to thank my patrons. In the Elite Pink Squad, we have Matthew Burns, Gay Uncle, Sari Tish, Las Potitas, Cool Gal Nan, Jet Sam Adams, and Natasha De Leon. And in the Gay Squad, we have Lone Resident, Christine Gregory. And in the Green Squad, we have Cayman Rider Furry, Edgar Allan Pup, The Only Sean, IJS, Not a Punch, But a Keek, Jack Beck, Galeria Gomez, Sarah G, Scarlet Rose, Boiled Peanut, Not an Omelet, But an Egg, Max Whale, Dea, and Niall O'Hearain. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the description. I'll see you guys next time.